Hello, friends. Welcome to Luxury and Adventure Stories, where elegance meets drama, and every story takes you deep into the world of wealth, power, secrets, and unforgettable journeys. Please subscribe and turn on your notification bell for more stories. Sit back, relax, like, and share as we dive into today's story.
The sun blazed over Colunda's sprawling slums, a relentless furnace that turned the air into a shimmering haze. 12-year-old James picked his way through the towering heaps of garbage at the city's edge, his bare feet burning against the cracked, trash-strewn earth. Each step sent a jolt of pain up his legs, but he ignored it. His focus was as sharp as the jagged tin cans he clutched in his calloused hands. Somewhere in this stinking maze of rotting food, broken glass, and twisted metal was something, anything, he could sell to keep his 7-year-old sister, Lily, from going hungry another night. For years ago, a fire had stolen their parents, leaving James and Lily alone in a world that seemed to care little for orphans. The flames had devoured their small home and their mother's laughter, their father's gentle stories. All that remained was a patchwork shack of cardboard and rusted tin, propped up against a crumbling wall in the heart of Colunda's slums. James had become both brother and parent, scavenging day and night to trade scraps for coins. Lily's thin frame and hollow cheeks haunted him, driving him deeper into the dump even when his body screamed for rest. Today, the dump was busier than usual. Other scavengers, kids as young as 5, old men with bent backs, swarmed the piles, their shouts and curses mixing with the squawk of vultures circling above. James kept his head down, avoiding the older boys who sometimes fought over the best finds. He spotted a glint of metal half-buried under a pile of soggy banana peels and dove for it, his fingers scraping against something sharp. Wincing, he pulled out a dented aluminum pot, its handle snapped but still worth a few coins at the market. He tucked it into the sack slung over his shoulder, his heart lifting slightly. Maybe tonight they'd have more than yam scraps. As he worked, a sudden commotion erupted nearby. A group of scavengers shouted, pointing at a truck rumbling toward the dump. Its bed was piled high with fresh garbage from the city's wealthier districts, where people threw away things James could only dream of owning. The truck's arrival was like a signal, and the crowd surged forward, shoving and scrambling. James hesitated. He hated these chaotic rushes. Last month, a boy had been trampled and left with a broken arm. But Lily's face flashed in his mind, her weak smile from last night when he'd brought home a single mango, bruised but sweet. He couldn't go back empty-handed. Gripping his sack, James darted into the fray, ducking under elbows and weaving through the chaos. The truck tipped its load, and a wave of trash cascaded down. Plastic bottles, rotting vegetables, and something that glittered in the sunlight. James's eyes locked onto it, a small, cracked radio, its antenna bent but intact. His pulse raced. A radio, even broken, could fetch enough for a week's worth of food. He lunged, but a bigger boy, Simon, shoved him hard, sending him sprawling into a pile of slimy rags. "That's mine," Simon snarled, snatching the radio. James's chest tightened with anger, but he knew better than to fight. Simon was 14, strong and mean. Scrambling to his feet, James turned away, his eyes stinging. Not from the dump's stench, but from the weight of another lost chance. As the crowd dispersed, he wandered to a quieter corner of the dump, his sack heavier but his spirit bruised. That's when he saw it. A tattered book, its cover faded, half buried under a pile of discarded electronics. He brushed off the dirt, revealing a title he couldn't read but pictures that made his breath catch. Diagrams of gears, wires, and machines that looked like they belonged in a different world. His fingers trembled as he opened it. The pages were yellowed, some torn, but the drawings were clear, bridges, engines, strange devices with arrows showing how they worked. James couldn't read the words, but the images spoke to him, whispering of possibilities he'd never imagined. He glanced around, half expecting someone to snatch this treasure too, then stuffed the book under his ragged shirt, its edges poking his ribs. For the first time that day, a spark of excitement flickered in his chest. The sun was dipping low when James finally headed home, his sack clinking with scraps of metal and plastic. The slums of Colunda came alive at dusk, with women cooking over smoky fires and children chasing each other through narrow alleys. The air carried the scent of charred maize and sweat, mingled with the ever-present tang of the nearby dump. James's shack sat at the edge of the settlement, its tin roof glinting faintly in the fading light. He pushed aside the cloth door and stepped inside, his eyes adjusting to the dim glow of an oil lamp. Lily sat cross-legged on the dirt floor, mending a tear in her only dress with a bent needle. Her braid was frayed, her face smudged with dust, but her eyes lit up when she saw him. "James!" she cried, scrambling to her feet. Her smile was weak, her cheeks too thin, but it warmed him like nothing else could. "Did you find something good?" He set down his sack and pulled out the aluminum pot, holding it up like a trophy. "This'll get us some coins," he said, forcing a grin. Then, lowering his voice, he reached under his shirt and pulled out the book. "And this is special." Lily's eyes widened as he opened it, the lamp's flicker dancing across the diagrams. "What is it?" she whispered, tracing a picture of a crane with her small finger. "It's about building things," James said, his voice thick with awe. "Machines. Big things. I don't understand it yet, but I will." He didn't tell her he could barely read, didn't want to dim the hope in her eyes. Lily clapped her hands, her laughter like a rare breeze in the stuffy shack. "You'll build something amazing, James. Maybe a house for us, with a real roof." Her excitement was infectious, and for a moment, James believed he could do anything. They shared a meager dinner of boiled yam scraps, the pot barely enough for two. James gave Lily the bigger share, ignoring the gnawing in his own stomach. As they ate, she chattered about a bird she'd seen that day, how it soared above the slums like it was free. James listened, but his eyes kept drifting to the book, now propped against the wall. Its presence felt like a secret promise, something that could change their lives if he could just unlock its mysteries. After dinner, Lily curled up on their shared mat, her breathing soft as she drifted to sleep. James lit the oil lamp, its flame sputtering as it burned low. He opened the book, his fingers tracing the diagrams. The lines and shapes were like a puzzle, each one a piece of a world he'd never known. He recognized a picture of a windmill, its blades spinning to make power. Could he build something like that? The thought made his heart pound. As he studied, a sudden noise outside snapped him alert, a low, mocking laugh. He blew out the lamp and peered through a crack in the wall. In the moonlight, he saw Simon, the boy from the dump, lurking near their shack with two others. They whispered, their shadows long and threatening. "James has been finding good stuff lately," Simon said, his voice carrying. "Bet he's got something worth taking." James's blood ran cold. He clutched the book tightly, his mind racing. If Simon knew about his find, word of James would spread, and others might come looking. He couldn't fight them off, not yet, but he could be smarter. Quietly, he dug a small hole in the corner of the shack beneath a loose tin sheet and hid the book there, covering it in plastic to keep it from the damp. He'd have to be careful, check the hiding spot daily, and maybe even mislead Simon by carrying decoy scraps to throw him off. As he lay beside Lily, staring at the gaps in the roof, James felt the weight of their world. Kalunda's dust, the dump's stench, the constant fight to survive. But the book's images lingered in his mind, a spark that refused to die. "One day we'll have a real house," he whispered to the stars, his voice echoing Lily's earlier words. He didn't know how, but he'd make it happen. The diagrams were his map, and he'd follow them, no matter how long it took. That night, he dreamed of machines rising from the dump, their lights chasing away the shadows of Kalundu. But in the dream, a figure watched him, a stranger with a tall silhouette, holding another book, one that glowed with secrets yet to be found. James woke with a start, the dream vivid, his heart full of questions. Was it a sign? He didn't know, but as dawn broke over the slums he rose, ready to scavenge again, this time, not just for scraps, but for the future he'd build with his own hands. The market of Kalundu was a riot of color and noise, a pulsing heart in the dusty sprawl of the slums. Stalls sagged under piles of mangoes, yams, and second-hand clothes, while traders shouted over the bleating of goats and the chatter of haggling customers. 13-year-old James wove through the crowd, his sack of scavenged treasures, bent nails, a cracked plastic jug, and a coil of copper wire, bumping against his hip. Sweat trickled down his back, but his eyes were sharp, scanning for the stall of Mr. Thomas, the only trader who never cheated him. Mr. Thomas's stall was a chaotic jumble of metal scraps, old tools, and battered electronics, tucked under a faded blue tarp. The trader himself was a bear of a man, his gray beard streaked with tobacco stains, his voice gruff but his eyes kind. James approached cautiously, setting his sack on the ground. "Morning, sir," he said, wiping his hands on his patched shorts. Thomas squinted at him, chewing on a twig. "What you got today, James? Better be worth my time." His tone was rough, but there was a twinkle in his eye that made James relax. James emptied his sack, spreading out his finds. The copper wire caught Thomas's attention. Not bad, he grunted, weighing it in his hand. 3 coins for the lot. It was a fair price, and James nodded, his heart lifting. 3 coins could buy a small bag of maize meal, enough to fill Lily's stomach for a couple of days. As Thomas counted out the coins, James's gaze wandered to a nearby stall piled with old radios, their dials cracked but gleaming in the sunlight. He'd been tinkering with wires and gadgets ever since finding that tattered engineering book in the dump a few months ago. The book's diagrams, gears, circuits, machines had sparked something in him, a hunger to create. He dreamed of fixing a radio, maybe even building something new. But radios cost money he didn't have. Thomas noticed his stare. "You like fixing things, boy?" he asked, leaning forward. James froze, his cheeks warming. He nodded shyly, then reached into his pocket and pulled out his latest creation, a crude contraption he'd made from scavenged parts. It was a small fan, its blades cut from a plastic bottle, wired to a tiny motor he'd salvaged from a broken toy. He'd spent nights twisting wires by the flicker of an oil lamp, his fingers blistered but his heart racing. The fan spun weakly when he connected it to a scavenged battery, but it worked. He held it out, his voice barely above a whisper. "I made this." Thomas's bushy eyebrows shot up. He took the fan, turning it over in his rough hands. "Well, I'll be," he muttered, flicking the switch. The blades whirred, stirring a faint breeze. A slow grin spread across his face. "You've got a knack, lad. Where'd you learn this?" James shrugged, too shy to mention the book he couldn't fully read. "Just figured it out." Thomas chuckled, a deep, rumbling sound. He reached under his stall and pulled out a worn sack, its contents clinking. "Here," he said, shoving it toward James. "Old electronics, broken radios, wires, bits and bobs. Nobody wants M, but maybe you can do something with M. Keep at it, lad." James's eyes widened. The sack was heavy, filled with treasures he'd only dreamed of scavenging. His heart soared, a warmth spreading through him like the sun breaking through clouds. "Thank you, sir," he stammered, clutching the sack like it was gold. Thomas waved him off, but his gruff voice softened. "Don't let this place swallow you, James. You're better than the dump." For the first time, someone believed in him. James left the stall walking taller, the sack slung over his shoulder, his mind buzzing with ideas. He stopped by a food stall, trading one of his coins for a small bag of maize meal and a single ripe tomato for Lily. The rest he'd save, maybe for a tool to help with his tinkering. That evening, in their cramped shack of tin and cardboard, James poured out the sack's contents while Lily watched, her eyes bright despite the hunger in her thin face. Wires, circuit boards, and cracked radio casings spilled across the dirt floor, glinting in the lamplight. "Look, Lily," James said, holding up a tangled bundle of wires. "I'm gonna fix these, make things we can sell." Lily clapped, her braid bouncing. "You're so smart, James. We'll have a big house one day, won't we?" He smiled, her faith in him like a shield against the world. "Yeah, we will," he promised, ruffling her hair. Over the next few weeks, James worked tirelessly. By day, he scavenged the dump, dodging vultures and rival scavengers. At night, he hunched over his finds, twisting wires and studying the engineering book's diagrams. He repaired 2 radios, their static-filled voices a small miracle. He sold them at the market, earning enough to buy Lily a pair of second-hand shoes. Blue sandals with a tiny flower on the strap. When she twirled in them, her laughter filled the shack, making every blister on his hands worthwhile. But as James turned 14, Colunda's slums grew darker. Gangs of older boys roamed the alleys, their eyes hard and their pockets heavy with stolen coins. They pressured scavengers to join them, promising quick money for stealing or running errands for shady dealers. James kept his head down, avoiding their gaze, but trouble found him anyway. One evening, as he trudged home with a sack of scavenged plastic, a shadow loomed across his path. Victor, a lanky thug with a scar across his cheek, leaned against a wall, twirling a knife. 2 of his cronies flanked him, their grins like hyenas circling prey. James's stomach twisted, but he kept walking, clutching his sack. "Where you going, little scavenger?" Victor called, his voice dripping with mock sweetness. He stepped forward, blocking James's path. "Heard you've been making things, selling M for good coins." James's heart pounded. He thought of the engineering book hidden under a tin sheet in their shack, the radios he'd fixed, the coins he'd saved. "Just scraps," he said, keeping his voice steady. "Nothing worth taking." Victor laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. He leaned close, his breath sour. "You're smart, kid. Smart ones make money fast with us. Steal a few things, sell M for me. Think of your sister, Skinny little thing like her needs more than yam scraps. James's fists clenched at the mention of Lily. Her trusting eyes, her hopeful smile, flashed in his mind. He thought of their parents, how they'd taught him to work hard, to be honest even when life was cruel. "No," he said firmly, meeting Victor's gaze. "I'm not like you." Victor's grin vanished, his eyes narrowing. "Big mistake, kid," he hissed. "You'll regret that." He stepped back, but his threat hung in the air like smoke. His cronies snickered as James walked away, his legs trembling but his head high. That night, in the shack, James hugged Lily tightly as she slept, her new sandals neatly placed by the mat. Victor's words echoed in his head, but so did Thomas's. "You're better than the dump." He vowed to protect Lily without losing himself. He'd work harder, scavenge before dawn to cover more ground, sell more of his creations. The engineering book, now smudged with his fingerprints, became his refuge. Its diagrams, pumps, generators, lights, promised a way out, a future where Lily could eat every day, where they'd have a real home. As he lay awake, staring at the stars through the shack's gaps, a strange sound drifted from the alley. A soft, rhythmic tapping, like someone hammering metal. Curious, James peered out, seeing a faint glow from a nearby shack. An old man, hunched and muttering, worked on something that sparked in the dark. Was he building something too? The sight stirred James's curiosity, but Victor's threat kept him inside. Tomorrow, he'd be smarter, faster, more careful. The spark from the book, from Thomas's belief, burned brighter than ever, and James knew he'd fight for it, no matter what Kalunda threw at him. At 16, James's days in Kalunda's slums were a relentless grind. The dump stench still clung to his skin, but his hands were steadier now, shaped by years of scavenging and tinkering with wires under the flicker of an oil lamp. The engineering book he'd found years ago was his constant companion, its dog-eared pages a map to a world he couldn't yet reach. Each night, he'd trace its diagrams, dreaming of machines that could lift him and Lily out of their tin and cardboard shack. Lily, now 11, was growing fast, her eyes bright but her frame too thin. Her dream of going to school haunted James. He'd promised her a future, and he meant to keep it. One humid afternoon, as James sifted through a pile of discarded electronics near the dump, he noticed a small shop he'd never seen before. It was little more than a lean-to, its walls patched with mismatched wood, but a sign above the door read Clara's Fixes in faded paint. A soft clinking sound drifted out, like metal kissing metal. Curious, James peered inside. An elderly woman sat at a cluttered workbench, her silver hair tied back, her hands coaxing life into a broken fan. Her fingers were nimble, but her eyes squinted, clouded with age. "You gonna stare all day, boy?" she called without looking up, her voice sharp but warm. James flinched, his cheeks burning. "Sorry, ma'am," he mumbled, stepping inside. The shop smelled of solder and dust, its shelves crammed with radios, clocks, and gadgets in various states of repair. "I just like fixing things." The woman, Miss Clara, set down her tools and studied him. Her gaze was piercing despite her failing sight. "Show me," she said, nodding to a pile of broken circuit boards on the floor. "Pick one. Fix it." James hesitated, then grabbed a board, its wires tangled like vines. He'd never worked under someone's watch before, but his hands moved instinctively, twisting wires and testing connections. Clara watched silently, her lips twitching into a faint smile. When he finished, the board hummed faintly, a small victory. "Not bad," Clara said, leaning back. "I'm getting old, boy. Eyes aren't what they used to be. Help me in my shop, and I'll pay you a bit, plus teach you what I know. Reading too, if you need it." James's heart leaped. He could barely read the words in his engineering book, relying on its diagrams. A chance to learn, to earn, was more than he'd dared hope for. "I'll do it," he said eagerly, his voice cracking with excitement. Clara's shop became his second home. Each morning, he scavenged the dump, dodging the usual threats, vultures, rival scavengers, and Victor's gang, who still eyed him with malice. By afternoon, he was at Clara's, sweeping floors, soldering wires, and listening to her lessons. She taught him to sound out words, her patience endless as he stumbled through the engineering book's text. "This ain't just lines on a page," she'd say, tapping the book. "It's power. Knowledge is your ladder out of here." Clara shared stories of her late husband, an inventor who'd built water pumps for villages before illness took him. "He believed in making things better," she said, her voice soft. "You've got that spark, James. Don't let Kalunda snuff it out." Her words fueled him, a fire against the slum's grind. James worked tirelessly, balancing scavenging, Clara's shop, and caring for Lily. He'd rush home each evening to their shack, his small wages tucked safely in his pocket. Lily greeted him with a hug, her chatter about the day's small adventures. Finding a shiny pebble, spotting a colorful bird, easing his exhaustion. One evening, Clara gave him an extra coin for fixing a tricky radio. James clutched it, his mind racing. It was enough, with his savings, to enroll Lily in a local school. A ramshackle building, but a real school with books and a teacher. The next day, he took Lily to register. Her eyes widened at the sight of children in faded uniforms, clutching pencils. "James, really?" she whispered, gripping his hand. He nodded, his throat tight. When she slipped on her new uniform, a second-hand dress donated by the school, Lily twirled, her laughter like music. "I'm gonna learn everything," she declared. James's chest swelled, every blister and sleepless night worth it. By 18, James's skills had grown sharper. Clara's lessons had unlocked the engineering book's secrets, and he could now read its explanations of circuits and solar cells. Inspired, he set out to build something new, a solar-powered lamp to replace their costly oil lamp. He scavenged parts from the dump, a cracked solar panel from a broken calculator, wires from a discarded radio, a bulb from a trashed flashlight. Nights blurred together as he worked in Clara's shop after hours, soldering under her watchful eye. One evening, the lamp flickered to life, its soft glow bathing the shack's walls. Lily gasped, clapping her hands. "It's like magic, James," she cried, her face radiant. The lamp saved them money on oil, letting James save more for their future. Lily's pride in him was boundless, her faith a anchor in Colunda's chaos. James showed the lamp to Clara, his hands trembling. She adjusted her glasses, inspecting it closely. "This ain't just a lamp, boy," she said, her voice firm. "It's a start. Take it to the market. Sell it." James hesitated. The lamp felt personal, a piece of his dream. But Clara's nod gave him courage. The next day, he approached Mr. Thomas's stall, his heart pounding. The trader, now grayer but still gruff, raised an eyebrow as James set the lamp on the counter. "What's this then?" he asked. James switched it on, the bulb glowing steadily. "It runs on sunlight," he explained, his voice steady despite his nerves. "No oil, no cost." Thomas's eyes widened. He tested the lamp, turning it over in his hands. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered. "How much?" James named a price, half expecting a haggle. But Thomas paid it without a word, his grin wide. "Bring more, lad," he said. "Folks'll want these." The lamp sold by noon, the coins heavy in James's pocket. Word spread, and soon Colunda's residents sought him out, mothers tired of smoky oil lamps, traders needing light for night markets. James made more lamps, each one better than the last. The extra money let him move himself and Lily into a small rented room. A single concrete space with a real door and a window. It wasn't much, but to Lily it was a palace. She hung a drawing of a bird on the wall, her smile brighter than any lamp. One night, as James worked on a new lamp, a shadow flickered outside their window. He froze, heart racing. Victor's gang had grown bolder, and rumors swirled of scavengers being robbed. James hid his tools and coins under a loose floorboard, his mind flashing to Clara's words. "Don't let Colunda snuff it out." For the first time, he felt he could build a future, not just for Lily, but for others in the slums. The lamp's glow was more than light. It was hope, and he'd protect it at all costs. As he lay awake, the hum of Colunda's night, crickets, distant laughter, a dog's bark, mingled with a faint tapping from the alley. It reminded him of the old man he'd seen years ago, hammering metal in the dark. Was he still out there, building something too? The thought stirred James's curiosity, but sleep claimed him, his dreams filled with solar lights dotting the slums, chasing away the shadows. At 19, James's life in Colunda's slums was a delicate balance of hope and struggle. His solar-powered lamps had brought light to dozens of homes, and the coins from their sales had moved him and Lily into a small concrete room. A step up from their old shack, with a real door that locked. Lily, now 14, was thriving in school, her report cards a source of pride that kept James going. But success in Colunda came with a shadow. The brighter his light shone, the more it drew envy, like moths to a flame. The market buzzed with its usual chaos. Vendors hawking roasted corn, children darting through crowds, the air thick with the scent of sweat and spices. James carried a basket of his latest lamps, their bulbs glinting in the sunlight, to Mr. Thomas's stall. The old trader greeted him with a nod, his gray beard twitching as he inspected a lamp. "You're making waves, lad," Thomas said, handing over a stack of coins. Folks talk about your lights all over Kalundu. James smiled, but his stomach tightened. The attention was a double-edged sword. As he left the stall, a familiar figure stepped into his path. Victor, now 20, lean and dangerous, his scar glinting like a warning. He'd grown from a thug to a gang leader, his crew a menace in the slums. His eyes locked onto James's basket, a smirk curling his lips. "Heard you're getting rich, scavenger," he said, his voice low and oily. "Those lamps fetch good money. How about you share? A cut for me, and my boys leave you alone." James's fists clenched, the weight of his coins heavy in his pocket. He thought of Lily, studying by lamplight, and Clara, who'd taught him to read and dream. "I don't owe you anything," he said firmly, his voice steady despite the fear in his chest. "I work for what I have." Victor's smirk vanished, his eyes narrowing to slits. "You'll regret that," he hissed, stepping closer. His breath smelled of cheap liquor. "Kalunda's mine, kid. Don't forget it." He turned away, his gang trailing him like shadows, but his threat lingered in the air. That night, James lay awake in their rented room, the hum of crickets outside mingling with Lily's soft breathing. He'd hidden his savings under a loose floorboard, but Victor's words gnawed at him. The slums were growing harsher, with thefts and fights breaking out as gangs tightened their grip. He clutched the engineering book, its pages worn but still a lifeline, and vowed to keep going. For Lily, for himself, for the future he could almost touch. The next morning, disaster struck. James arrived at Clara's shop to find its door splintered, the shelves overturned and wires scattered like spilled guts. Clara sat on a stool, her face etched with grief, her hands trembling as she held a broken radio, her husband's favorite. "Victor's boys," she said, her voice hoarse. "Came at dawn. Said it's a warning." James's heart sank, guilt washing over him. His refusal had brought this on her. "I'm sorry," he whispered, kneeling to pick up a shattered circuit board. "I'll fix this." Clara shook her head, her eyes fierce despite her age. "You didn't break it, James. Don't let them break you." She reached into a locked drawer and pulled out a dusty laptop, its screen cracked but intact. "My husband's," she said. "He used it for his inventions. You're ready for bigger things. Take it." James stared at the laptop, its weight heavy with possibility. "I don't know how to use it," he admitted. "You'll learn," Clara said, her voice firm. "You always do." Heartbroken but resolute, James used his savings to buy new tools and would to rebuild Clara's shop. They worked side by side, hammering planks under the scorching sun, their sweat mixing with the dust. The shop rose again, smaller but sturdier, a symbol of their defiance. At night, James opened the laptop in their room, its screen flickering to life. He found a cybercafe in Kalunda's market, its computers slow but functional, and used his coins to access online tutorials. Coding was a new language. Lines of numbers and symbols that felt like the engineering book's diagrams brought to life. He taught himself in stolen hours, his fingers clumsy but determined, while Lily studied beside him, her grades a beacon of hope. Inspired by Clara's belief, James began building solar chargers, small devices that could power phones using scavenged panels. They sold well, easing the sting of his drained savings. He dreamed of a business, something bigger than lamps, that could lift them out of poverty for good. Lily's pride in him grew, her hugs tighter each time he brought home a new device. "You're gonna change Kalundu," she said, her eyes shining. By 22, James's skills had outgrown the slums. He designed a low-cost solar generator, a box of wires and panels that could power a small home. It was his boldest creation yet, born from nights of coding and tinkering, its hum a promise of independence. Lily, now a top student, urged him to enter it in a national innovation contest in the capital. "You have to go, James," she said, her voice fierce. "Show them what you can do." James hesitated. The capital was a world away, full of people with fancy degrees and polished shoes. But Lily's faith pushed him forward. He borrowed money from Thomas for a bus ticket, the journey a blur of dusty roads and nervous thoughts. The contest hall was a gleaming building, its air cool, and its floors so clean they reflected James's worn sandals. Competitors in crisp suits presented drones and apps, their confidence making James feel small. He clutched his generator, its rough edges a stark contrast to their sleek gadgets. When his turn came, James's voice shook as he explained his invention. "This is for people like me," he said. "People who can't afford electricity but deserve light." He switched on the generator, its steady hum filling the room. The judges leaned forward, their questions sharp but curious. James answered with passion, his words raw but honest, drawing from years of struggle and hope. The crowd clapped, a sound that echoed in his chest. To his shock, James won first prize, a certificate and a cash award that made his head spin. In the audience, a woman in a sharp blazer approached him. "I'm Sarah," she said, her smile warm but businesslike. "Your generator could change lives. I want to fund your startup." James stared, his mind racing. A startup? He'd never dared dream that big. Sarah explained her plan. Invest in his idea, produce his generators, and sell them across Kalundu and beyond. Dazed but hopeful, James agreed. Back in Kalundu, he launched Bright Future Tech, with Sarah's funding, renting a small workshop near the market. Orders poured in. Families wanted generators for their homes, traders for their stalls. James hired local youth, including a few former scavengers, their hands eager to learn what he'd fought to master. One evening, as James tested a new generator, a familiar figure lingered outside the workshop. Victor, his scar now faded but his eyes still sharp. "Heard you're a big man now," he said, his tone unreadable. James tensed, ready for trouble, but Victor raised his hands. "No fight, just respect." He walked away, leaving James stunned. Had his success changed even Victor? In their rented room, Lily hugged him, her schoolbooks piled high. "You did it, James," she whispered. For the first time, he felt the weight of Kalunda's shadows lift. His generators were lighting up homes, and his heart was lighting up a future, one he'd built from scraps and dreams. By 30, James stood at the pinnacle of a life forged from the ashes of Kalunda's slums. Bright Future Tech, his company born from scavenged wires and a tattered engineering book, had made him a billionaire. Its solar generators and lamps now powered homes, schools, and markets across Kalundu, their soft glow banishing the darkness that once defined the slums. The city's skyline, once a haze of smoke and dust, sparkled with clean energy, a testament to James's vision. But his wealth was not measured in coins alone. It was in the lives he'd changed, the hope he'd kindled, and the unbreakable bond he shared with his sister, Lily. James never forgot his roots. The memory of their tin and cardboard shack, the dump stench, and Lily's hungry eyes drove him to give back. He built a proper house for himself and Lily, a 2-story home with wide windows and a garden where she grew bright yellow flowers. Lily, now 25, was studying medicine, inspired by their hardships and the clinic visits that had saved her from fevers as a child. Her textbooks filled their living room, her determination a mirror of James's own. Each night, she'd share stories of her classes, her voice alive with dreams of healing others. James listened, his heart swelling, knowing their struggles had shaped her strength. Kalunda's transformation was James's proudest achievement. He funded schools with solar-powered classrooms, where children like Lily once was learned to read and dream. He built clinics staffed with doctors, offering free care to scavengers and slum dwellers. The dump, once a graveyard of garbage, became a recycling hub, its workers trained in sorting and repurposing under Bright Future Tech's programs. James hired many, giving them steady jobs and a chance to escape the cycle of poverty. Among them was Victor, once a gang leader who'd threatened James's dreams. Reformed by James's kindness, jobs, second chances, and a belief in redemption, Victor now managed a recycling crew, his scar a reminder of a past he'd left behind. Clara, now retired, lived in a small house James had built for her near the market. Her shop was gone, but her spirit remained fierce. She visited often, her eyes misty with pride as she watched James's success unfold. "You climbed that ladder, boy," she'd say, her voice cracking. "Your light's brighter than any lamp." James hugged her tightly, grateful for the woman who'd taught him to read and believe in himself. One afternoon, as James inspected a new recycling plant, a young boy approached him, clutching a crude solar lamp made from scavenged parts. "I built this, sir," the boy said shyly, his eyes wide with hope. James knelt, inspecting the lamp's wobbly wires, and smiled. It was like seeing himself at 12, sifting through the dump with dreams too big for the slums. "Keep building," he said, handing the boy a card for Bright Future's training program. "Come find me when you're ready." The boy's grin was a spark, a reminder of why James fought so hard. Lily's graduation was the pinnacle of their journey. James sat in the university's auditorium, a sea of proud families around him, as Lily crossed the stage in her cap and gown. Her medical degree was a triumph, a promise kept from their days of yam scraps and flickering oil lamps. When she spotted him in the crowd, her smile was brighter than the sun. After the ceremony, she hugged him, tears streaming down her face. "We made it, James," she whispered. "Because of you." He held her close, their struggles forging a bond stronger than steel. That night, he framed her diploma, hanging it beside a faded page from the engineering book that had started it all. On a warm evening, James stood on a hill overlooking Kolundu, the city now a tapestry of lights from his solar generators. The air was sweet with jasmine from nearby gardens, the hum of life below a song of resilience. Lily joined him, her white doctor's coat gleaming in the sunset. She'd started working at one of his clinics, her gentle hands healing the community that raised them. "You kept your promise," she said, her voice thick with emotion, tears glinting in her eyes. "A real home, a better life." James smiled, his thoughts drifting to their shack, the dump's heat, and the tattered book that sparked his journey. He'd built more than a business. He'd built hope, not just for them, but for Kolundu. "We did it together," he said, squeezing her hand. The city's glow was a reflection of their shared dream, a legacy that would outlast them. That night, James and Lily hosted a community feast on the hill, a celebration of Kolundu's rebirth. Tables groaned under platters of jollof rice, roasted goat, and mango slices, their colors vibrant under strings of solar lights. Drummers played, their rhythms pulsing through the crowd, while children danced, their laughter mingling with the clink of glasses. Clara sat at the head table, regaling neighbors with stories of James's early days in her shop. Victor, now a respected foreman, shared a quiet toast with James, his eyes free of their old malice. "You changed me, man," he said softly. "Thank you." A surprise came when the mayor of Kolundu arrived, a rare sight in the slums. He presented James with a plaque, naming him Son of Kolundu for his contributions. The crowd cheered, their voices a wave of gratitude. James accepted it humbly, his gaze on Lily, who clapped with pride. "This isn't mine alone," he said, his voice carrying over the music. "It's ours, every scavenger, every dreamer who kept going." As the feast continued, an old man approached James, his face weathered but familiar. It was the tinker James had glimpsed years ago, hammering metal in the dark. "I knew you'd shine," the man said, his voice raspy. He handed James a small, hand-carved wooden gear, its edges smooth from years of handling. "For your journey." James took it, a chill running through him. Had the man been watching all along, a silent witness to his rise? The gear felt like a talisman, a reminder of the sparks that started it all. Children played under the glow of his lamps, their silhouettes darting through the night. One girl, her braids bouncing, ran to James, holding up a drawing of a solar-powered house. "I want to build like you," she said. James knelt, his heart full. "You will," he promised, seeing Lily's young face in hers. He handed her a small solar kit from his company, a seed for her dreams. As the stars emerged, James stood with Lily, watching Kolundu pulse with life. The feast's music faded into a soft hum, the community's stories of resilience weaving a tapestry stronger than any machine. He thought of their parents, the fire that took them, and the engineering book that lit his path. His dream had become a legacy, one that would light up Africa for generations. "We're home," he whispered, the wooden gear warm in his pocket, the city's glow a promise kept.
Thank you for watching today's episode of Luxury and Adventure Stories, where every tale is draped in elegance but stitched with real emotion. Bellhop Bell, if this story moved you, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your support keeps the journey going, one story at a time. Speech Balloon, drop a comment below. What would you have done in their place? Movie Camera new episodes drop every week. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next.